I need to tell you about my mother. Her name is Barbara. She's 72 years old, lives alone in a small house in Tucson, the same house she and my father bought 40 years ago. Dad passed 5 years back, and since then, Mom's been on her own. She's independent, stubborn as hell, refuses to move in with me or my sister, says she's perfectly capable of taking care of herself. And she is, mostly. But what happened to her last month has me questioning everything. Whether she should be living alone, whether any of us are really safe, whether the systems we trust to protect the elderly are actually working. Let me start from the beginning. It was a Wednesday, October 18th. I remember the date because it was 2 days after my birthday. I was at work, sitting in a meeting, when my phone started buzzing. I glanced at it. Mom. I sent it to voicemail. I'd call her back after the meeting. She called again, then again. By the fourth call, I excused myself and stepped into the hallway. Something was wrong. Mom doesn't call like that unless it's an emergency. I answered. Mom? What's wrong? She was crying. My mother, who I've seen cry maybe 3 times in my entire life, was sobbing on the phone. She said someone had called her, said they were from the police department, said I'd been in a terrible car accident and was in the hospital, said I needed money immediately for emergency surgery or I was going to die. My heart sank. This was a scam. I knew it instantly, but my mother didn't. She'd panicked, thinking her son was dying, and had done exactly what the scammer told her to do. She'd gone to the bank, withdrawn $8,000, her entire savings account, money she'd been setting aside for years. She'd gone to a Bitcoin ATM, something she barely understood, and had deposited the cash. Given the scammer the transaction codes over the phone. By the time she'd finished and the scammer had hung up, reality had started to set in. She'd called me to check on me, to see if I was really in the hospital. And when I'd answered, healthy and fine, she'd realized what had happened. $8,000 gone in less than 2 hours. I left work immediately, drove to her house. She was sitting at her kitchen table, still crying, surrounded by tissues. The paperwork from the bank was spread out in front of her. The receipt from the Bitcoin ATM, evidence of her mistake. I held her while she cried. She kept saying she was so stupid. How could she fall for something like that? She should have known better. She should have called me first. But here's the thing. These scammers are professionals. They're trained to create panic, to override rational thinking, to manipulate people when they're most vulnerable. They'd told my mother that time was critical, that if she didn't act immediately, I would die. What parent wouldn't do anything to save their child? I called the police, filed a report. They were sympathetic but not optimistic. Said these scams are nearly impossible to trace. The money was already converted to cryptocurrency and likely transferred to accounts overseas. The chances of recovery were almost zero. I called the bank. They said once the money was withdrawn, there was nothing they could do. They suggested she might want to freeze her accounts and get new cards in case the scammers had access to other information. For days after, my mother barely spoke. She was humiliated, ashamed. She kept apologizing to me even though she had nothing to apologize for. That money was hers. She'd worked her entire life for it, and someone had stolen it with a phone call. But the story doesn't end there. 2 weeks later, they called again. Different voice, but same script. This time, they said my sister had been arrested, that she needed bail money, that Mom needed to act fast or my sister would spend the night in jail. This time, Mom hung up and called me immediately. She was shaking, but she hadn't fallen for it. We reported it to the police again. They said these scammers often target the same victims multiple times, knowing they're vulnerable. I spent the entire weekend at Mom's house. We went through everything. changed her phone number, set up call blocking, made a list of all her accounts, and set up additional security measures. I also made her promise that if anyone ever called claiming to be from the police, or a hospital, or the IRS, she would hang up and call me first. No matter what they said, no matter how urgent it seemed. She agreed, but I could see the fear in her eyes. The fear that she might fall for it again. That she might make another mistake, that she was losing her ability to protect herself. We also talked about her living situation. I suggested, as gently as I could, that maybe it was time to consider other options. Moving closer to me, looking into assisted living communities where she'd have people around. She shut that down immediately. Said she wasn't ready, said she was fine, but she wasn't fine. I could see it. The way she jumped every time the phone rang. The way she asked me to check her mail because she was afraid of scam letters. The way she'd started questioning every email, every text message, wondering if it was real or another attempt to steal from her. What those scammers took from my mother wasn't just money. They took her confidence, her sense of security, her trust in the world around her, and that's worth more than $8,000. I'm telling you this because this is happening everywhere. To someone's mother, father, grandmother, grandfather. Every single day. The FBI estimates that seniors lose over $3 billion a year to scams like this. $3 billion. And those are just the reported cases. Many victims are too embarrassed to come forward. If you have elderly parents or relatives, please talk to them about this. Set up safeguards. Let them know that no legitimate organization will ever demand immediate payment over the phone. Not the police, not the IRS, not the hospital. If someone calls claiming there's an emergency, the first step is always to hang up and verify through official channels. And please, check in on them regularly. My mother was alone when that call came. If someone had been with her, they might have stopped her. But she was by herself, terrified, and that made her vulnerable. I've also learned something else from this experience. We need to stop treating these scams as isolated incidents, as something that happens to other people, as something victims should have known better about. These are coordinated criminal operations targeting our most vulnerable population, and we're not doing nearly enough to stop them or protect potential victims. My mother's case is still open. The detective assigned to it says they have leads but can't share details. I don't know if that's true or if he's just being kind. Either way, I'm not holding my breath for justice. What I am doing is making sure it doesn't happen again. I call Mom every day now, not just to check on her, but to remind her that she's not alone. That if something happens, if someone contacts her, if anything feels wrong, she can reach me. She's doing better now, getting back to her routine, playing cards with her friends, tending her garden. But there's a sadness that wasn't there before, a wariness. She's lost something that can't be replaced, so please, protect the elderly people in your life. Have the difficult conversations, set up the safety measures, and remind them that there's no shame in being targeted by criminals. The shame belongs entirely to the people making those calls. My mother is one of the strongest people I know. And if this could happen to her, it could happen to anyone. This is about my grandfather. His name was Robert. Was, past tense. That's the hard part. He died 3 months ago. Natural causes, the death certificate says, heart failure at age 81. But I don't believe that. I think someone killed him, not directly, not with violence, but they killed him all the same. Let me explain. Grandpa Robert lived in a retirement community in Sacramento. One of those nice places with individual cottages, a main building with activities, medical staff on site. He'd moved there after Grandma passed about 4 years ago. Said he liked the community aspect, having people around, not being isolated, He was doing well there, made friends, played bocce ball, went to the movie nights. He had some health issues, diabetes and high blood pressure, but nothing he couldn't manage with medication and regular checkups. His mind was sharp. He did crossword puzzles every morning and could beat anyone at chess. About 8 months ago, I noticed a change when I visited him. He seemed distracted, kept checking his phone. When I asked if everything was okay, he said everything was fine. Great, actually. He'd made a new friend who was helping him with things. I asked what kind of things. He said just errands and appointments. Someone to help him get to the pharmacy, pick up groceries, that sort of thing. The retirement community had staff for that, but he said this person was more reliable and they'd become close. He showed me a picture on his phone. A woman, probably in her 40s, blonde hair, nice smile. Her name was Michelle. She'd started volunteering at the community a few months earlier, he said, helping various residents. She'd been especially attentive to him. Something about the way he talked about her made me uncomfortable. Not jealous, uncomfortable. Warning bell, uncomfortable. I asked how they'd met. He said she'd approached him one day in the common area, started a conversation, mentioned she was a volunteer, offered to help if he ever needed anything. Over the following weeks, Michelle had become a regular presence in his life. She'd drive him to appointments, help him with his computer when he had trouble, even cooked him meals occasionally. He was clearly fond of her. Talked about her like family. I did what any concerned grandson would do. I looked into it, called the retirement community and asked about their volunteer program. They had one, yes, but they had no record of anyone named Michelle. I described her. They said no one matching that description was registered as a volunteer. I told my grandfather this. He got defensive, said maybe she was new and hadn't been processed yet, said I was being paranoid, said he was a grown man and could make his own friends. I dropped it. I didn't want to upset him, but I kept watching. On my next visit, Michelle was there. I met her. She was friendly, charming even. Said she'd heard so much about me. But when I asked specific questions about her volunteer work, her answers were vague. She changed the subject smoothly, redirected the conversation. After she left, I checked with the community director again. Still no record of Michelle. I asked them to verify that she had clearance to be on the property. They said they'd look into it. 2 weeks later, my grandfather called me. He sounded upset, said I'd embarrassed him, that the community had asked Michelle for identification and she'd been offended, that she'd stopped coming by because of what I'd done. He was angry with me. We argued. It was the last real conversation we had. Michelle came back, of course, a few days later. I know because my grandfather's neighbor, Mrs. Chen, called me. She was worried, said Michelle was there almost every day now, sometimes staying for hours, and she'd noticed Michelle leaving with bags. Shopping bags, she thought, but she wasn't sure. I drove up that weekend unannounced, knocked on Grandpa's door. Michelle answered. She looked surprised to see me, but recovered quickly. Said my grandfather was resting. I pushed past her and went inside. The house looked different, emptier. I noticed immediately that some things were missing. A clock that had belonged to my grandmother. A painting that had been in the family for generations. Photo frames, small valuable items. I asked where everything was. Michelle said my grandfather had been decluttering, donating things to charity, that he'd asked her to help because it was too hard for him to go through everything alone. She said it with such conviction that for a moment I almost believed her. But my grandfather, when he woke up and came into the room, looked confused. He didn't remember giving away the painting. Didn't know where the clock was. Michelle jumped in, gently reminding him that yes, he'd told her to take those things, that he'd wanted to simplify his life. And he nodded, uncertain. accepting her version of events. That's when I understood what was happening. She was manipulating him, taking advantage of small memory lapses that come with age, gaslighting him into thinking he'd agreed to things he hadn't, and he trusted her too much to question it. I confronted her directly, asked her to leave. She refused, said my grandfather had invited her, and I had no authority to make her go. She turned to him and asked if he wanted her to stay. He looked between us, confused and stressed, and said yes. He wanted her to stay. He told me to leave instead. I left, but I contacted Adult Protective Services, filed a report about suspected elder exploitation. They said they'd investigate. Weeks went by. I called for updates. They were working on it, they said. These things take time. I tried to visit my grandfather again. He wouldn't see me. Said I'd caused enough trouble, that I was trying to control his life. Michelle had clearly been working on him, turning him against family who might interfere. I reached out to other family members, my sister, my cousins, told them what was happening. Some believed me, others thought I was overreacting. Thought Michelle sounded like a nice woman helping a lonely old man. They didn't see what I saw. 3 months ago, I got the call. My grandfather had died, heart failure. He'd been found in his cottage by staff during a routine check. Michelle had been with him the day before, neighbors reported. She'd left in the evening, and he'd seemed fine. At the funeral, Michelle showed up, cried appropriately, expressed condolences. Some family members hugged her, thanked her for being there for him in his final months. I couldn't even look at her. When we went through his estate, the extent of the damage became clear. His bank accounts were nearly empty. He'd written checks to Michelle totaling over $40,000. For what? We couldn't determine. The notes on the checks said things like household expenses and medical costs, but there were no receipts, no records. Jewelry was missing. Collectibles, his coin collection worth thousands. His watch, all gone. Michelle claimed he'd given her permission to sell items because he needed the money, but we couldn't prove otherwise. There was no will, and his memory in those final months had been inconsistent enough that his verbal statements wouldn't hold up in court. We tried to pursue charges. The police said it was complicated. Proving exploitation of the elderly requires evidence of coercion or diminished capacity. My grandfather had written those checks himself, had handed over items himself. Even if Michelle had manipulated him, proving that legally was nearly impossible. Adult Protective Services said their investigation had been ongoing, but they hadn't found sufficient evidence to act before he died. They said these cases are difficult. Victims often don't cooperate because they trust their abuser. Family members don't realize what's happening until it's too late. Michelle disappeared shortly after the funeral. The phone number my grandfather had for her was disconnected. The address she'd given him turned out to be fake. She'd vanished with tens of thousands of dollars and items worth even more. I hired a private investigator. He found that Michelle had done this before. She targeted elderly men in retirement communities across California. Always the same pattern. Befriend them. Gain their trust. Isolate them from family. Take everything she could. Move on before anyone could stop her. There are at least 6 other known victims. Maybe more who never came forward. The investigator found her real name and last known location, which we turned over to police. They said they'd look into it. I don't know if they ever did. My grandfather died believing Michelle was his friend. Maybe that's for the best. Maybe it's worse. I don't know. What I do know is that he died alone, confused and exploited. And I couldn't stop it. I blame myself every day. I should have done more. Should have been more persistent. Should have found a way to protect him even when he didn't want to be protected. But I also blame the systems that failed him. The retirement community that didn't properly vet who was coming and going. Adult protective services that couldn't act fast enough. The legal system that makes it nearly impossible to prosecute these crimes. The culture that tells elderly people to be polite, to trust, to not question people who show them kindness. I'm sharing this because it's happening everywhere. These predators specifically target the elderly because they're vulnerable. They're often lonely. They want companionship. They're trusting. And when family members raise concerns, the victims defend their abusers because they can't believe someone they trust would hurt them. If you have elderly relatives, please watch for warning signs. Sudden new friends who isolate them from family. Missing valuables. Unexplained financial transactions. Changes in behavior or mood. And please, have the difficult conversations before it's too late. Set up safeguards, power of attorney, joint bank accounts, regular check-ins. Don't make the mistake I made. Don't assume they'll be okay. Don't back off when they get defensive. Push through the discomfort because their safety is more important than temporary hurt feelings. My grandfather is gone. I'll never get him back. The money and items Michelle stole don't matter compared to that. What matters is that he spent his final months being manipulated by someone he trusted. And I couldn't save him. Don't let this happen to someone you love. Be vigilant, be persistent, and don't give up, even when it's hard. Because the alternative is what I'm living with now, the knowledge that I could have done more, should have done more, and didn't.